it's Jen and Anna, and welcome to another video by the Creative Collective. So today we're going to talk about switching and what it's like. With DID, Dissociative Identity Disorder, our consciousness is divided up into parts, and there is dissociation or a lack of connection between these parts. In fact, everyone's consciousness is built up of parts. The difference between people with DID or OSDD, which is otherwise specified dissociative disorder, and those without it, is the level of dissociation between these parts. Our previous video describing how DID forms and why will be linked somewhere up here. If you want to learn more, it's got lots of great info. And so switching is what it's called when a different part of the consciousness takes control of the body. So Jess, Anna, and I, we are all parts in a larger collection of parts that make up this body's consciousness. So if I'm in control of the body and Anna starts to take control, that's switching.
Yeah, so switching can be fast or slow depending on the situation. For example, if there's a situation like our safety's at risk or we need to stand up for ourselves, like me or one of the other protectors is going to be out like a heartbeat. And like we just shove whoever's fronting out of the way. Fronting, by the way, is what it's called when an alter is in control of the body. Because at the end of the day, this is a disorder based on survival. And if the brain thinks that survival is threatened, it reacts fast. Same goes for negative triggers that are reminders of the trauma we experienced. Some trauma holding alters hold very strong reactions to those, and that brings them to the front quickly. There can also be very strong positive triggers. For example, if we're in a store and see a cute stuffed animal, there's a good chance that one of our child alters will front. Slow switches for us are more driven by everyday situations. You know, maybe there's something that one of us wants to do in the outside world, or, you know, things like that.
So I'll start off by saying that switches can be totally different for every system. And whatever it's like for your system is completely valid. This is just what it's like for ours during a normal day. So obviously if we're super stressed or if we're in danger, switching will look much different. But otherwise, this is kind of what an average switch looks like for us. So for me, when I start to switch, the first thing I feel is a really strong pressure in the front of my head. And this pressure continues to build until sometimes, honestly, it feels like my head might burst. If I'm either really fighting a switch, or if I'm switching with an alter that I don't have a good level of communication with, sometimes I get a migraine, most times I get a migraine. And what sucks about switching migraines is that no medicine works. So you've just kind of got to sit there in a quiet room with an ice pack and, you know, ride it out. But anyway, as this pressure starts building, I start to feel things that are very not me. So perhaps I have an urge to go listen to music I wouldn't normally listen to, or watch a TV show I have no interest in, or I start to feel taller or more masculine. Things like that. And by paying attention to these clues, I can usually figure out who it is who's close. For example, if I suddenly want to work out and go watch the cosmos, I know that it's Jess. And if I suddenly want a glass of red wine and to go watch Law & Order SVU, I know it's Anna. So my recommendation is to pay attention to these clues right before you switch, because these can be positive triggers you can use in the future to get others to front. And we'll talk about that a bit later. So anyway, the next step is I usually start hearing whoever it is' voice in my head. And typically the louder their voice, the closer they are to being the one in control. And I can't always communicate easily with my alters. Most times I can't hear them at all, so I usually take this opportunity to pass along some info or ask some questions and get some info from them. So then one of two things happen. Either, and it actually kind of happens on a spectrum, but these are the two extremes of that spectrum. So on one end, either I look at the clock and suddenly it's hours later. And that's how I know a total switch took place, because each of us experiences amnesia for what another does. On the other end of that scale, I remain co-conscious with whoever's fronting. And that experience is more like being a passenger in my body. I'm not the one moving the body or speaking, and my thoughts sound quiet, almost like I'm talking into space. But I can hear whoever is fronting at full volume. And when I'm observing things, I'm observing at a different distance. It's almost as if I was like a tiny person in the back of my mind. And I've noticed that the better my communication is with an alter, the more likely it is that I will stay co-conscious with them rather than switching completely out. So that's something that we're really trying to work on.
For me, since I spend most of my time in the inner world, switching is a bit different. So our inner world is kind of like a third dimension inside our mind. We can talk to some of the other alters and kind of live our own lives to some degree. So it really is like a family. We'll probably do an episode on inner worlds at some point, since there's a lot to talk about there. So when switches are quick, like if there's a bad trigger, I have no warning, and that usually results in a massive headache. Otherwise, we have a room in our inner world that you can think of kind of like the fronting room. It's a large kitchen with like circular seating to the left, and then on the right is a large stovetop with this like stainless steel range. And above this area is a window where we can see the outside world. Basically, if someone's standing in this room, we have some level of communication with whoever's fronting and the outside world.
Yes, so if I'm fronting, I can feel bumps of emotion or hear words from whoever's standing in the kitchen. Sometimes if they're close enough to kind of like the middle front of the room, we can have full conversations.
Yeah, so sometimes while I'm in the inner world, I can hear music or snippets of conversation from the outside world, almost like it's playing in the sky. But I know that's not the case for every alter. And if I feel like it, I'll go to the fronting room to see what's going on. Other times it's just like this telepathic draw I feel to go to the room. And sometimes I'm bored and just want to talk to Jen or whoever else is fronting, so I'll go. But once I'm there though, I don't really have any choice over whether or not we actually switch. So basically, like both internally, me walking into the room, and externally via like positive triggers like music or drinks or, whatever, we can encourage a switch as much as possible. But whether or not it happens is up to the brain. And our switches are typically pretty slow, maybe like 10 minutes or so. So there will be a blur in between where whoever is fronting doesn't know who they are. In inner world, I can feel myself getting more and more drawn in and closed off to my surroundings, almost like tunnel vision. And then everything in the inner world just kind of goes black, while everything in the outer world becomes clearer and clearer. And if it's Jen I just switched with, since she's the host, things are a bit different for her, and she doesn't go into the inner world. So she's completely gone, she'll experience amnesia, but otherwise she becomes like a little voice in my head. And we can hold conversations, and she usually has a lot of influence over my actions. So if there's something she really wants, I'll feel a strong pull to do that thing. But if I want, I can stop it, just like how you feel a strong urge and then you stop yourself from acting on it. So I'm still the one in control. But sometimes there can be more than one person in the kitchen. So whoever is fronting will feel the presence of multiple people, and sometimes that makes it really confusing.
Yeah, so my experience is pretty close to Anna's. Being a physical protector, I tend to hang around in the kitchen a bit more, to watch in case I'm needed. And that's probably the reason why Jen and I switch so often. But especially in like work situations, I tend to be a bit more confident than Jen. So if we have to speak on a call or something, that's usually me. There's two types of triggers that exist to get an alter to front, and that's positive triggers and negative triggers. Negative triggers are some of the things I mentioned earlier. Trauma reminders, arguments, safety concerns, things like that. And what's considered a negative trigger is going to be specific to each system. And then there's also positive triggers, and positive triggers are specific to each alter, and they can be things like a certain song or a certain food or a certain TV show. And like, to be 100% clear, if you know of an alter's positive trigger and you use it to get them to front, that is a total dick move. Unless their safety is at risk and you need to get a protector, or if you have everyone's express permission that that's okay, do not do it. It is a complete violation. So I will say, now that we are getting better at communication with each other, and I think Jen's figuring out what some of our positive triggers are, I do really appreciate you positively triggering us out, so that, or at least triggering me out, so that I get more time in the body to do the things that I want. Yeah, so, I know a lot of us have these moments of wishing we could have our own bodies so that we could live life like the way we want, and not that I would ever actually want that, because I love this family, but we all have our moments, so.
So that's all for today. We hope you enjoyed our video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye.